All
Okay.
right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for your patience. Welcome to the September Arcadia Book Club discussion of Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. So we've got a big group tonight, which is fabulous, and probably in relation to how fabulous this book is. So let's just start talking. I I adored this. I loved this. And like we've said before, James and I chose this without either one of us reading it, just because we know that Ann Patchett is always fantastic and a safe bet to get a great book. So I loved the story within the story kind of thing, how she just kind of gently gave us details and plenty of surprises in there, and I loved just the way she wrote it. I mean, I laughed out loud so many times at some of her one-liners, and clearly Anne is a mother because she nailed motherhood really well. So, all right, let's chat. Mr. Bonin, what say you?
Well, um, okay. I'm a little tired because I flew from Scotland yesterday because I was with a whole bunch of friends celebrating belatedly my 75th birthday. So I'm a little out of sorts. But I thought this book, I guess what I loved most was the way she held back. Um, and the way that she uh, kind of kept her daughters interested and let us know every now and then that there just were things that she wasn't ready or able to share. Uh, and then, of course, the big surprise at the end was so beautifully laid. And I thought it was just a great book about structure, about learning how to structure a story. Uh, and of course, it didn't hurt that it was, it dealt with both Chekhov and Thornton Wilder, uh, particularly, sequences in our town that are, um, kind of resonate for everybody right now for all kinds of reasons. But the fact that APT did our town this summer, just added an extra level of kind of pleasure to everything. But she's a beautiful writer who trusts that her readers are paying attention, and so she doesn't kind of overlead you, but she lays in story and then does a backstory and then story and backstory and story and backstory, and the way that the three daughters were differentiated, I thought was great. Um, and it's just it felt very true to me, uh, only having stepchildren, but they're both girls, and they're now one's in her 50s and the others are late 40s, and I've known them since they were preteens. Um, so I've watched their whole crazy lives unfold. Plus, I have uh, 15 now. There used to be 17 nieces and nephews, and God knows how many grandnieces and nephews. They just keep popping out with alarming regularity. So, I've been around both parents and children in personal ways for many, many, many years. Yeah, I just thought it was very smart, and as Nancy said, quite funny sometimes and very moving. Um, and having been involved with, I've been involved with this particular theater in our town, but many other summer theaters over a long career of directing. Yeah, there was a lot of gulping truth about the ways that she talked about the theater. So it was. Oh, one last thing, and then I'll let everybody else talk. I loved the fact that one of the things that she held back was that her husband was the director of the play. That was so brilliant. That was so frigging brilliant. And you got a little clue every now and then, and then all of a sudden you thought, wait, how did they end up at this cherry orchard? Yeah, it was just really good. Really good, Anne. Good job. Okay, that's enough blather for me. There are a lot of people here tonight. Holy mackerel. Okay, ideas, thoughts,
Maybe
convictions?
press your hand raise button, or literally raise your hand if you want to speak, and then so we're not talking over each other. I see no hands.
Well, I see hands, but they're not raised. That's yeah.
Unmute.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm trying to distract my puppy as we talk. So if I look like I'm crazy, that's why. I really, really enjoyed the book, and I didn't really know if I was going to, because it's not what I would typically read. I really loved, I thought it was very warm. Like the entire part of reading it, it just kind of felt like it was my mom or my grandma like telling me this story. Like, it was a very warm experience, which I really enjoyed. And I think what kind of stuck out to me the most was how much it reminded me of, if anybody's read by Elizabeth Strout, like Lucy by the Sea or O. William, she really reminded me of Lucy in that series, which I really liked because I love her in that series. So.
Patchett.
All right, thanks, Freya. Bonnie, are you raising your hand? Oh, you just moved your hand. Okay. You guys are so shy when you have to raise your hand.
Okay, just barge in, then somebody talk.
Barge in, somebody talk. Go, Larry.
Well, it was a brilliant choice after just seeing Our Town at APT and Anton's shorts. It was like the perfect book to read, and I think I wouldn't have appreciated it as much if I hadn't just seen Our Town, because I wouldn't have remembered all the details of the 3 acts and everything else. But this tied with Still True and Lessons in Chemistry as my favorite books of the year. And I agree pretty much with what everyone has said. Every revelation I did not see coming. I didn't see it coming about the husband. I didn't see it coming about the kids. I didn't see what would happen with Duke and Sebastian, both showing up at the end. And the way she subtly wrote about the abortion, I was like, wait, did she just have an abortion, or did I imagine that at the end? Because it was so subtle, and it's like it reminded me or a movie or a play where they break the fourth wall, and she's saying, this is just between me and you and all the other readers out there. We were the only ones getting the pictures. But I thought the daughters were really interesting characters. And of course, they were all named after someone significant in their mother's life. But her stream of consciousness when she was a young woman and going to the theater was so different from who she was as an older adult, yet you knew and felt it was the same person. So it's I've never read an Ann Patchett book that I didn't like, but you don't think she can top herself, but I think she did. And certainly Northern Michigan, I'm sure, reminded most of us of Spring Green and APT. And I wondered if you guys had heard from any of the staff or actors at APT if they've read it, because they certainly should.
Well,
I any of them have read it. I don't know if they've had time. Connie. Connie has her hand raised.
Okay. Well, when I started reading the book and I saw it take place primarily in Michigan, I love Door County and Cherry. I love Spring Green and APT. And just like you're saying, Larry, it reminded me of APT. And like you, Larry, I did happen to see Our Town this summer at APT. So it kind of tied in nicely for me as a reader. I thought the book was great. Early on when her daughter's named Emily, and then she has that part. And I thought, how is that going to tie in? And she wove that in nicely. Emily, her daughter's not going to have any children. Our town, And of course, Steve was going to do what he was going to do right from the get-go, wasn't he? And Sebastian, I'd like to know more about him. He was a pretty interesting guy. And that dad, the most subtle guy of everyone in the whole book. It was a joy to read. And, I've read, I think, everything by Ann Patchett. I have to say, Ann does not have any children. And I read some essays she did a while ago, and that's by purpose. She decided not to have kids. But she certainly does a great job of writing as a mother, doesn't she? So great. Thanks for recommending the book. And Bria, I just saw you done. Anyway, good recommendation. I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Mary Pat, do you want to speak?
Yes. So I had to refresh myself before our meeting because I started reading it, I think the day after our last meeting, and I was so entranced that I tore through Tom Lake in about 2.5 days. So I had to go back and refresh my memory. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about the story was Lara's story and her telling her children, and the girls hearing this story and being excited, appalled, horrified at the fact that their mom had a life before she was mom. And I know that's something that sometimes I think about it, because even still, my children are grown adults, and I'll say something about something that happened a long time ago, and they look at me, especially my daughter, because I think there's the mother-daughter relationship, and she'll be, no, you couldn't. Yes. So there were so many levels of storytelling, but that was one of the ones that I loved. Lara's ability to tell her story of her as a person, but yet still be a mom, she told so many stories: actress, mother, daughter, girlfriend. And I thought that Ann Patchett did that really well.
All right. Thanks, Mary Pat. Terry? You're not driving, right, Terry?
No, I am passenger all the way. But I did enjoy this book so much that because we're on our way to a hockey game, I thought if I'm passengering, I can participate. I enjoyed it too. I did have a critique that I feel like I'll get out of the way so that I can get to all the good stuff about it. But I feel like she was a little toxically positive about the whole experience, and maybe it just, and I thought it was funny that her daughters tended to be kind of like the politically correct Greek chorus, you can't comment on her legs, or you can't, whatever she was doing that was. But I did feel like Ann Patchett herself in writing this book was a tiny bit, and she may have recognized it throughout the story, but she was a tiny bit tone deaf to how different their circumstances were. She was talking about how joyful it was for them to be together, and it wasn't that way for everyone. And even, we were super great. We had an older son, Boomerang, home from New York, which was so great in the beginning. And then it got a little long. and, and so I didn't know how realistic that was. But the comment about Sebastian, I read somewhere that she said that she couldn't decide if she wanted Lara or Sebastian to be the narrator of the story, and that she may actually write a book from his point of view at some point, which I thought was very cool. Because I mean, far and away, he had my heart in this novel. And even though there was supposed to be, I think, a great seduction scene with Peter Duke in the beginning, I mean, he from the very beginning, I got a sense of him that he certainly didn't want to turn your back on him if you were serious about having a relationship with him. But I think the thing that was the biggest gift for me was that she so beautifully captured summers, and it feels like summers go so fast the older you get, that she really you could almost smell and feel all those feelings that you had at that age, in her late teens or early 20s, that summer evoked. And I thought that was great. But, and as James said, I thought the structure was amazing. Like I kind of like I'm sure everybody at some point was like looking back and forth with, wait, is he the director? Is that Joe?
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah.
No.
Well, just a quick couple of things. It seems like when I read these books, I always look for a paragraph or a sentence that just kind of stops me in my tracks a little bit. And it wasn't until the very end of the book, on 253, kind of in the middle of the page, the past, she says, to type it would look like a disaster, but regardless of how it ended, we all had many good days. And it was just like, okay, I don't have to tell my daughters everything. We all we all ended up okay. And it made me think back to the Martha McPhee book, The Elegant Woman, where they wished they had known more about their lives and their sisters' lives, and how to pass that on down through your family. And so it was a nice juxtaposition of, like, what do you keep secret and what do you share, and let your daughters, your family know who you are. But that it all looks like a disaster at the time, but it turned out okay. So I'm like many of the others, I really enjoyed the book, and so glad you all chose it.
All right. Thanks, Adele. Deb Cromer, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks, Nancy. I too look for, paragraphs or lines that resonate with me, that kind of sum up the big picture thinking that I'm doing. And I went back, I saw Our Town last Friday at APT, and I've been rereading it. And so I noticed some lines in there, and then and Tom Lake as well, that kind of encapsulated what I was thinking and enjoying about them. But the lines that struck me from Our Town were Emily, when she goes back after she's died and she goes back to Grover's Corners, I didn't realize. So all that was going on and we never noticed. And then a few lines later, do any human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute. And that made me think of when Laura was telling the story, and Maisie says, I don't see why you have to give up one for the other. And Laura says, you don't have to. You want to. You wake up one day and you don't want the carnival anymore. In fact, you can't even believe that you did that. And I think it was wonderful the way she she is telling the story to her daughters, but reliving it and rethinking that whole experience in light of her present with her family. And, so it was about noticing and being present, like I think is one of the big ideas in our town, but also, when you're revisiting the past, you think of it in a different way and you learn something important about the choices that you made and maybe rethinking those. So I thought it was lovely. Both of them are very, very in some ways gentle stories. And it just was weird that they were both of them intersected with my life at this point. And so I think I was noticing the connections with my own life, which of course always enhances it. But thank you for choosing it and for hosting this tonight.
Absolutely.
Hey, Nancy, could I just interject something about actors? One of the things that I thought was particularly potent was that Laura says about herself when she starts into rehearsing the Sam Shepard play, that she realizes that she's a terrific Emily, but she's not a terrific actress. And if more actors were able to look in the mirror and say that to themselves, many, many more actors would be less unhappy than most of them are because they feel like they've been overlooked or they've been undervalued, or that most of them aren't as good as they think they are. And most of them think they can do anything and most of them can't. And so Laura was really, really fortunate to be the age she was when she figured that out. And I say that with all love for actors, even the ones that are a pain in the ass in the rehearsal room, because it's hard to do what they do. But it's, I felt that was for Ann Patchett. I have no idea how she came to that or if some actor said that to her, but I just thought that was terrifically smart. And that's one reason why actors should read this book, I think.
So James, isn't it Lara? Because she got it from Dr. Zhivago?
Yes.
Her name? Okay.
Remember, she changed, she took the U out of her name,
right,
high school, after she read Dr. Zhivago. I have this problem with Ann Patchett all the time. I feel like Ann Patchett's kind of sneaking around behind me and writing about weird things in my life too, because I actually dated a woman named Laura, Laura, for 2 years, but she insisted that everyone call her Lara. To which I would always reply, if you want to be called Lara, take the fucking U out of your name. Because if people see the U, they're going to say Laura. That's just what they're going to do. And I don't know why you spend your life being angry with them when they're just doing what's normal. So,
gee, James, I can't understand why it didn't work out.
Yeah.
I think the opening scene of the book, when she wasn't going to audition for the play, but she's watching how terrible all the actors are, that was such a great way to start it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right,
and
Scott.
I also have to say, as a fan of Sam Shepard, you couldn't have a more different play from our town than Fool for Love. And that was another thing that I was glad I've seen Fool for Love, because she really didn't explain what that was about. Two crazy people who are passionately loving and hating each other at the same time, and how she really couldn't do that. But the other thing is, she tore her Achilles heel when I was reading the book, like the day after Aaron Rodgers So that was so perfect because I was like, oh, she's not going to be in the play after that. She's done. So that was just a nice serendipitous thing that Aaron Rodgers was nice enough to have the same thing happen to him.
Maybe you should send Aaron Rodgers a copy of Tom Lake.
He does have time on his hands to read right now.
Say, let me say one more thing about rehearsal. Almost no one would allow or encourage actors, at least over the course of more than one rehearsal, to perform rehearsal or perform drunk. You might do it once when I mean, I did direct a short Lanford Wilson play once where these two women were drinking cognac the whole play, and it suddenly occurred to me that these were fairly young, actors in their probably early 30s and probably didn't have a pot to piss in, so they probably didn't drink much cognac. And so one rehearsal, I did have them drink the whole time. And just they drank through a run through of the play. They drank the cognac the way they'd been drinking water during rehearsals, and it really, if you'll pardon the pun, sobered them up about how potent that is. And so no, that was the one thing about it that it's not so much that it rang untrue. It's just I didn't want any of you who don't know much about rehearsals and professional theater, that almost never happens.
But I thought it showed what a horrible director he was, unlike Joe Nelson.
Yeah, no, that was
an excellent director.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah.
All right, Steph.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about a couple themes that have already been brought up. Those idea of being present in time, and also what James was talking about with her ability to recognize her own limitations. And I think what that created was this lovely book about the passage of time and being able to let go of what is no longer yours or no longer possible. And to be so accepting of that, and to be so enamored with whatever your new life is, like going to the cherry farm and being able to just be so in love with whatever life is in that moment, even though that means letting go of all the things of the past. So I thought that was really cool. But the other thing too I wanted to mention is that she just does such a good job differentiating characters. Like even the dogs had different characteristics. You know what I mean? Like there's no shallowness in her characters, which I just love. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steph. Janice. Oh, unmute yourself, Janice.
There. Okay. Hi. Okay. This has been really interesting to me. This is the first time I've been on one of your book chats. And so I love your bookstore, and I have only been down there a couple of times. So I live a long way away. But anyway, so I saw this coming up and I signed up for it. But okay, so my reaction has been completely different to almost everyone else's.
Yeah.
And I just had a really hard time. I got into the book at the beginning, and then it just seemed to be slow to me, or I was trying to figure out where are we going with this and what's the point? I mean, I have two grown kids, so I know, there's some things you tell your kids and some things you don't. But there were parts of it that I was really intrigued by, and parts of it just I wasn't catching it. I know the Traverse City, Michigan area and the cherry farms and all that. I grew up in Michigan, so I was like really excited for that. But I have to say, I haven't seen Our Town, and that might be part of the problem. It sounds like I'm the only person that hasn't seen it. But I have now, after listening to you, I read about half of the book and then I put it away and I was going to return it to the library. But then I thought, no, I have this book chat coming up. I'm going to wait until after that. Well, now I am more intrigued than I was, and I'm seeing things in a different way. So I am going to go back and finish it. So this has been helpful for me. And I read many other Ann Patchett books that I have really enjoyed. So I couldn't figure out why this one wasn't doing it for me. But I'm going to go back to it.
But
Janet,
Two quick things, Janice. Sorry. One is we encourage people to this is not about a book club where you have to like the book. In fact, if you had to like the book, Larry wouldn't be in the book club. So, but the other thing is that you don't have to see Our Town to enjoy the book, but it is. It's helpful, I think, if you know the story a little of that.
Okay.
But I think one of the brilliant things about the part that Larry was talking about at the beginning of the book is she does give you some of the lines from the play, and she gives you opinions about what's good and what's bad, and what how to sort of play it. So it is a play that I think, I haven't seen the production at APT, but it is a play that demands a very kind of quick, cold New England telling. It's a very, very unsentimental play, and I think that's why it plays into the and what Ann Patchett is trying to do, which I think in some ways pushes towards sentimentality, but I think in a way that's intentional. So that and to piggyback on that wonderful thing that Steph said before, one of the great things that happens in the very beginning of Act 3 of Our Town is the stage manager lets you know we're in the graveyard, and that a lot of people have come up to this place just wild with grief. And then he says this magical thing that most of us know who've lost important people in our lives, and that is that time and the weather and life allows things to just settle and soften a little, so that you never lose those people that you've lost. They're always, you carry them in you, but life allows you, well, I think the word he uses, and it's the right word, is you quiet. And so life allows you to quiet with the grief, that the grief quiets inside you. And I just feel like that's it's an extraordinarily smart way to introduce. Thornton Wilder obviously knew what was coming. We don't know what's coming when the first time we see the play. And so he manages to show you kind of both things in that scene when Emily goes back to see her 13th birthday. Even though people say don't choose a special day, just see it, so anyway, but the key thing that I started to say, Janice, is it's great when you don't feel like you have to like the book, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know, I didn't get this. And you're not alone. I mean, a lot of people felt the book was too slow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a criticism that was in the book about, for a lot of critics. Allison.
I just wanted, I generally liked the book, but I wanted to tag on to what Janice was saying, because I felt it, and what you just said about the quote from Our Town, James, where you're talking about the quiet, the use of the guy talking about the quieting. It is I think it's a really, really quiet book. And there were times when I wanted it to be a little more, sounds odd to say for a book that's so much about acting in a play, but I wanted it to be a little more dramatic. It has a very, one of the reviews I read about it said that it's a book about choosing happiness over misery. And I thought that was really insightful. And it's hard to write about happiness. It's not as dramatic as sorrow. But there were times when I struggled with it too. I kept at it, and I had just recently seen Our Town for the first time since I was 14 years old. So boy, the difference between seeing when you're 14. Actually, I was struck by how much was the same between being 14 and being 70. You know, it's like, wow, I was moved by, I was a profound 14-year-old that I got that, you know. But so that was great to see them juxtaposed. And, you know, of course, the ghost of Chekhov is hovering over this book, you know, all over the place. But I was especially interested in the development of her character over time. I mean, I thought that was the most adroitly handled thing, where we're moving back and forth between, you know, the young woman and the mother telling the story. That was to my point of view, one of the best things about the book. It was just handled so effectively. You know, that's hard to do, I think, to see a character develop in time that way. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say for the moment. I see some hands up, so I'll stop talking.
All right, thanks, Allison. Diane, do you want to unmute yourself?
There we go. Yeah. Hi. Yeah, having just seen, you know, all the plays up at Spring Green, it's interesting when I think, Janice, you said you found it slow, and somebody else said it was quiet. And I kind of like the term quiet a little bit better. It was one of the things that I noticed so much about our town when we were up there seeing all of the plays. All of the plays were very, I don't know what the right word really is. I'm thinking energetic or more intense or more whatever. And then we saw our town, and it was just slower and quieter and, you know, very different in tone from, you know, the other things we saw that week. And, you know, like Mary Pat, I tore through this book in 2 days. I mean, on the one hand, it was kind of slow and quiet. On the other hand, I couldn't put it down. You know, I just was so interested in the story and in her past. And I think having it be, you know, during the pandemic, when I think we were all forcibly slowed down and all forcibly thinking about our lives and the past and where we are and what we were doing and the choices we made, was just so perfect. You know, it was great because it was a way to have the daughters all at home, you know, for an extended length of time, and with them picking the cherries, they had plenty of time to be chatting while they were doing something else. But I just thought it was just so beautifully written. And there's a passage on page 116 that I thought was really beautiful when she's talking about, you know, the things you remember and the things you don't remember. And I won't read the whole thing because it's kind of a long, it's the last paragraph at the end of chapter 8 on page 116. And I just thought that was so beautiful, of some of the things we think we'll always remember that will be seared that we don't then always remember, and some of the other things that we do remember. So yeah, I just absolutely loved it. And I hope she does do another book about Sebastian, because I'd love to know more. And I was weeping at the end, you know, when I don't want to give it away now that I know Janice hasn't finished it, but with the way things were tied up at the end, I just thought it was so emotional.
Thanks, Diane. All right, Bria. But hold that puppy up so we can get a good look at that puppy.
Yeah, if you hear me like say ow, it's because she's feral right now. But look at the camera. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, she's 3 months, so she's a little crazy. But
Bria, what's her name?
Mabel.
Mabel, oh, I love that.
She's pretty cute. Oh my gosh, don't hurt yourself. I just wanted to say 2 things super quick. First of all, I wanted to say, Janice, if it makes you feel better about not having seen Our Town, I didn't know that was a real play until we started talking in this book club. So, and then secondly, I just kind of, one thing that I really, really loved was kind of this backdrop setting of the cherry orchard. I don't know. I don't even know what struck me about it a ton. Part of it, I think, was just like loving nature and scenery like that. But I think it was also such a perfect place for her to be like telling the story to them, because it is such a huge part of their past and their history. And now she's kind of explaining her past I don't know. I just thought it was kind of a cool, almost like full circle moment. I don't know. I actually like the cherry orchard.
Wait, oh, am I muted? No. Nance?
Yes.
Yeah, I keep now the people, as I listen to people talking, it's just there are certain moments in the book that I just laughed out loud, and the whole when the actors when he went to the cherry orchard when he was dating her, and I kept thinking, all right, these are actors, and they're walking around a cherry orchard. Somebody better say something about the cherry orchard. And then, sure enough, the one unlikely guy to do it quotes Lopakian, which is, I just thought, well, that's perfect because, he gets this so well. And so she really did her homework on the way actors' minds work. I think it was great. But yeah, that was really sweet. But it was surprising that he would have quoted Lopakian, because then you look back and you realize who the director really was. And, he's the one who should have been talking about Lopakian. But anyway, that was really sweet. It was just great.
Well, clearly she did her homework on everything, because I did not know that Ann Patchett was not a mother, and she nailed writing about mothers. And also the whole with the farming, the line where Laura says, why don't they just sell some of the land? I went, oh, because if you've lived in a farming community, you know that doesn't fly. So I don't have any more hands up. Todd, you gotta unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I read a very early advanced copy of this, and I was completely impressed. And when I talked with it about some of the people who work at APT, they were very excited about its release. And I thought it really captured the mindset of the actors and putting on a production. And as James said, realizing the point at which an actor is just incapable of doing a part, which he knows far better than the majority of our population. So I found it very believable. I embraced it. It reminded me of the approach that Maggie Ginsberg used in Still True, of saying things that are very uncomfortable about the choices we make, but very true, and the outcome from that. So I'm glad that for the most part it appears that people have enjoyed this, and I've been especially interested in what Larry's response would be to this, because I know he loves Still True, and now it sounds like he likes Ann Patchett. And the only other book I've read from Ann is her essays, and it just humanizes it. And I'm interested in reading more of her catalog because of it. So thank you.
Todd, you have to read Bel Canto.
Yeah, well, I've got about 20 books in the garage.
No, but
I've gotta
that's
read
the one.
just
That's the
before
one
that,
that
sir.
is unforgettable. But it's so different than this. Janice, I appreciate your comments, because I'm often the only one who has problems with the books. But to me, the subtleness, the slowness of it was part of what worked so well. But I really enjoyed at the end of the book where she said the difference between all the actors and that Joe, and I didn't just like this because my last name is Nelson, but she said Joe is a Nelson. He did the work to make sure there would always be Nelsons, some Nelson or another on this land. The difference being I had the good sense to marry him. And that last sentence about who you marry or end up with changes the course of your life. I mean, whose life would you want? Her life or Duke had a horrible life. He had a horrible life. He was famous and rich, but he was one of the most miserable. I mean, the scene at the rehab place, it was so pathetic. But I agree with whoever said the last page of the book, I think, is one of the best endings ever. And I'm just going to read two parts. This is the thing about youth. You change your mind. And the last sentence, where would he be in the world except with his brother here with us? I mean, that is such an incredibly great last line. And to bring the characters and the stories and her family together, it was such a wonderful way to end the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, as an aside, I read somewhere that Meryl Streep does the audio. So Janice, if you're thinking of giving the book a try again, or anyone wants to read it again or listen, because as I was reading it, I just thought, oh, I wish she was reading it to me.
I listened to it and she did a great job with it. I mean, of course, but I wondered if that impacted how slow the book felt or how dramatic the book felt for me because of her reading it. I did not have that experience or feeling at all. So I don't know.
I had a friend who read it, and she said that the Streep's narration is just incredible, and it really made it come alive. So I kind of like to listen to it, I think.
I feel like it would be difficult to pick an actress that kind of like embodies that warmth as well as Meryl Streep. So that's really cool.
Al?
Yeah, well, I had a trip, and I started the book, and I loved it right from the first page. But I had a trip in front of me, so I got the audio and I listened to it on the 6 hours in the car. And then when I got back, I went back and read the part that she had read, because I just think it was so well written that if I wasn't reading it, I was missing something. So Meryl did a great job, but I thought she did a great job of writing too. The other thing I wanted to ask, it seems to me like talking your kids into, getting your kids to ask you about what happened earlier in your life is, from my experience, nearly impossible. I think I'll be a cold day in hell before my kids ever get around to that. But the fact that the three daughters got so wrapped up in figuring out what their mother's life was, I think you have to give a little credit to Joe, because he seemed to be always doing the wrong thing by mentioning this old boyfriend of the mother, and then he'd walk away from it and he'd get away and he'd just let her deal with it. But I thought, well, he thinks he loves his wife so much, he wants to make sure that the daughters understand what made her the way she is. And I thought it was kind of a clever way to get that hook into it. Otherwise, how do you explain kids asking about their parents? I mean, I don't know, maybe other kids are more inquisitive than mine. So,
but Al, you're exactly right. It was, and it's an old director's trick, I have to say, which is to just drop something in and then pretend that, oh, did I say that? Oh, did I suggest? Oh, I didn't know that. It's a great way to kind of open a door without anybody knowing the door has gotten open. And I think that I agree with you. I think he did that on purpose, because I think he felt like these girls need to know their mother fully. Yeah. And most children don't know their parents fully. As you've heard me say in this group before, I mean, one of my biggest sorrows is not knowing my parents' stories during World War II. I mean, it's just a huge hole in my sort of personal history that will never be filled, and I think it's great. And particularly, that the dad would know, because the youngest daughter is trying to be an actress. And that's just such a great gift to give to her, to see the world in a way that she has to experience on her own, of course, but at least she'll know what's coming. And that's a great gift, I think.
James, can I ask you one other question? There's one part in the book where Laura says the director can leave once the once the show goes on for the first time, or after opening night, I think she says the director can leave. Otherwise, she seemed to be, and seemed to know a lot about writing, but could that possibly be true?
Well, no director would ever direct a play if he couldn't leave after opening night. Because it's, trust me, you've seen the play too many times by the time the play opens. Frequently you're having a wonderful time and you love the people. Every now and then everybody in the room wants to kill each other. It doesn't matter. It's just when the play opens, it's their play. And you need to go do something else. And they need you to go do something else because it's time for Dad to let the boys and girls.
Okay, yeah, thanks for clearing that up for me.
Yeah, no, it's real, but it really is true. And every good director or even mediocre directors will tell you the exact same thing. Oh my God, if I had to sit there and watch that all summer, I'd chew my arm off before I would do that. So yeah.
All right, Janice.
Yeah, I just want to say I thought it was interesting too, that one of you said, now I don't know who, but about Joe. And I agree with that, where he'd drop in something and all of a sudden he'd disappear from the scene and leave Laura to talk with the girls about it. And I thought that was really interesting to me. And I also did read some reviews about Meryl Streep reading it, and I thought, oh, that's a good idea. I might go that route, especially if I don't get back into it again by reading it. Do it by listening, because I do enjoy audio books too, so I could try that. So right now, first I have to finish. I'm racing across the country and the mostly true story of Tanner and Louise. So that one just goes and goes and goes. So fast. So then I can slow down and I can go back to Tom Lake. more relaxing time.
All right. Kate C. Isn't able to do audio and video, but she said, did anyone else get a kind of Princess Bride vibe on how the story got told? Example, the daughters in this case interrupted, asked questions, similar to the way that the grandson does in Princess Bride. I thought this was really kind of fun that the reader actually got more of the story than her daughters did. So that's
I did too.
Fabulous movie. Great tie-in. Yeah. I thought that was a really fun take. Deb Cromer.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to extend that idea of Joe opening things up a bit more, and just go back to what I was saying before. I think for me, he must have wanted the daughters, and maybe he needed to be reminded himself that that he and the cherry orchard and their life, was a choice that she made. And given Duke and all that happened and who he later became, and her giving up acting for that way of life, that was a really important piece to all of this. That's all.
All right. Oh, Allison.
Just tagging onto that, I mean, it's very interesting because he's the director, I mean, he's the director of the play, and in a very subtle way, he's directing sort of what a little bit the unfolding of the story. I found him a very interesting character, and I would really like to know more about him. I wish she would write a novel from his point of view. So that's all.
Right. He often walks into the room and says, where are we in the story? So he kept going. They could have gone off on a totally different tangent and been talking about something completely different. Okay. Fabulous conversation.
One last, because I love that idea that, because what he's also doing is reminding his wife, reminding himself, and reconnecting himself, his wife, and his daughters to the validity of the choice of this particular life they have. Because Duke's life, I mean, there are a number of people who get to Duke's level and have a very happy engaged life that isn't very driven by just their own ego. It's driven by doing good in the world and for themselves. And so it's possible. But Duke's story is not uncommon. And the fact that I think the message really is, as scary as happiness might be, or as boring as happiness might be, why don't you try it? See. Give it a shot.
So Nancy, since you're a fellow bookstore manager like Ann Patchett, I think you need to call her up and tell her we want the Joe Nelson story and the Saint Sebastian story, so it can be a trilogy. The Tom Lake trilogy is what we want.
Okay, I'll do that. Maybe I'll go down to Nashville and see if we can meet her instead.
The bookstore is very cool. I met her business partner when I was there for a conference.
They have dogs.
Yeah.
But they don't have a cafe, so they can have dogs. All right. This was fabulous. Thank you so many new people for joining us. I hope you'll come back again. So let's talk about October, which is only 11 days away somehow. And we are going to read Persepolis. So this is not a new book. This book is a few years old, but look what it is. It's a graphic novel. And we've never tried a graphic novel in book club before. So
really about banned books, though. I mean, you know, it's
been, it's also a banned book. Right. But there was a request to do a banned book. So we're going to do a banned book and a graphic novel at once. So this is the book about the Islamic Revolution in Tehran in 1979, right? So it was. So it's told from the point of view of a 9-year-old and her life and what happens to her family, because her family was pro-Shah, and what happens to her family during the Islamic Revolution. So that is going to be, oh gosh, you know what I should have done? I should have looked at the date here. October 18th. So October 18th, Persepolis.
And Nancy, is that the book that has both parts? Because she wrote 2 books.
No, we're just doing the first part.
Just going to do part
we're
one.
just doing part 1?
Part 1. Okay, and then.
But Larry, part 2 is available at Arcadia Books in Spring Green, Wisconsin.
November we have not chosen yet. December will be our everybody shares their favorites or a suggestion. And then we're going to tell you early because we're going to read a big beast for our January. James is shaking his head. This was his choice. We're going to read a big beast for our January classic choice. We're going to read Middlemarch by George Eliot. So listen, this is an 800-page book, but you've got 3 months to do it. You do do 80 pages a day and you'll be done in 10 days. Why not? So you got some time to chip away at this one.
I think we just skip the favorites month and plow through this.
I also really recommend Rebecca Mead's book. I think it's called My Life with Middlemarch, about how much that book affected her.
Do you remember?
It's almost better than Middlemarch.
Do you remember what Lara was reading when she went to the rehab?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So there we have a little tie-in.
Nancy, what are the dates for November, December, and January?
Okay, so November will be the 15th, November 15th, and then December 13th. We'll go a little bit early because you don't have to have done your homework for that. And then January will be the 17th.
And Allison, what was the name of that book?
I think it's called My Life with Middlemarch by Rebecca Mead. Some of it was in is that right, James? Some of it was in the New Yorker.
I'm sure that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And what was the book for November? I'm sorry, I somehow missed this.
There isn't a November one yet.
Oh, you don't know? Okay.
Can't you just be impressed that we have three?
Yeah, I mean, enough already.
Ah,
I
3
want-
months.
I wanted to say
Have
one.
that.
I want to say one thing about Martha McPhee's new memoir that I
Mm.
shared with you about this week. She does something in here that Ann Patchett does in Tom Lake, and except that it's real, which is that she's there are moments in Tom Lake when the mom just decides not to tell the daughter something, or just for whatever reason. But in Martha McPhee's memoir, which is there's so much to admire in it, but she does one thing that and she had a very, very unusual childhood. But what's great about it is that there are times in the book where she'll have a scene with one of her sisters, and she won't name which sister it is intentionally. And then there'll be a moment where you just think, okay, now she's going to reveal this thing. And instead she simply says, that's not my story to tell. Meaning that, the real event was in the eyes of her sister. Or there's a beautiful moment with her son where she says that, where her son's she lets us know that her son has shared with her a thing that happened to him the previous night, which made her come back from the farm to New York to be with him. And then she simply says, that's not my story to tell. And I so admire that. I just think that's knowing enough about, what rights you have to share people's lives, and what rights you shouldn't take, even though most people don't stop themselves. So she's a very impressive woman and a very, very good writer. And it's a terrific book. So anyway, I wanted to work that in, and it took me all the way till 6 after 7. All right. So.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you next month for Persepolis.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.